Room correction can trash your sound, or it can greatly improve your sound. Welcome back to another episode of Home Theater Gurus. So, room correction. Now this is one I've been planning on doing forever. I mean, you know, probably 8 months I've been saying I'm going to get it done, but now's the day we're finally going to get it done. Now I'm moving, so I still can't find my mic. I don't know where my mic is, but then we don't really need the mic because I've actually got some old files saved in my phone. So we're going to go through everything Audyssey related. Now this will work for any room correction. I don't care if you have Dirac, you know, whatever it is, WiPo, they're all the same. They're all room correction. Now there's some differences, but the basic principle is the same. So it's going to apply to everything. Like I said, I don't have my mic, so I just plugged in a pair of headphones and it jumps into the Audyssey setup. It doesn't know it's just a set of headphones, but we don't care about that right now. So the first thing it's going to ask you to do is just, you know, to start. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to hit the start button. Okay. Now for this step right here, I don't go and get the tripod out because where's my head? My head is on a couch, okay? And I don't care what or how much you have invested in your system, your head is on a couch and maybe it has a pillow behind it or whatever. We want that mic to be where your head is. We don't care about something or a spot that their head isn't even at. It's irrelevant. And we're gonna go into that a little bit more in a minute. So for me personally, I don't worry about a tripod. It's just an added expense. I don't even set up the little cordboard, you know, get up here. Don't do it, don't need it. Okay, what I do is I recline my chair and I stack some pillows up and I get that mic right where my head is and I make sure there's nothing obstructing it. Now, of course, if you have the seat back behind your head when you're seated, you know, the pillows need to be stacked up right where your head is. So it's still going to be behind the mic, but that's going to be realistic to where your ears are located and what's hitting your ears. Now, of course, a measured response is different than, you know, what your ears pick up in a sense that your brain can kind of, you know, get rid of some of the trash of the room and kind of, you know, it's a lot more sophisticated than just a measurement, but that's what we have to work with. Okay, set your subwoofer at 50%, hit next. All right, now, here is one of my biggest gripes. I've had a lot of people, and when I say a lot, if I had a nickel for every time someone came to me with this problem, I don't know, I could buy a couple hamburgers or something. But anyway, it's very common, okay? Number one is supposed to be where your seated head position is, your main listening position. Okay, then you've got all these other spots around it. Now, if you remember the room mode episode, in a small room, say 18 feet, you know, you've got room modes, peaks and nulls very, very close to your seating position. Now, of course, we use that calculator to place our seats so we're sitting in a good spot. We already know 1.5 feet in front of us, or, you know, 2 feet, there's going to be a really bad modal response. There's going to be a dip there. There's going to be a huge null there. There's issues all around it. We're basically splitting hairs trying to find the perfect place to sit. I've had so many guys, you know, they'll go through episode 7, they'll get their sub response looking perfect, like this right here. They'll do this, and then they're like, man, I just ran Audyssey, now I measured, my response is trash. It doesn't sound good anymore. So I'm like, well, where did you set your mic? Oh, I followed the screen. Well, that's why. I mean, we're measuring out here. We know we've got problems out there. So why are we going to let that part, or that be part of our sampling to do our EQ? Because that's what it's doing. It's going to measure the room around this bubble, and it's using that information to like merge it all together to make an EQ file. I mean, and some people are like, oh no, it's just sampling the area. It only uses the first one. You know, no, you do that and your response is not going to look good. It looked good before, it's going to be trashed afterwards. So don't do that. You know, number one, maybe our head, maybe right here we've got, you know, our wife or our kids or whatever next to us. And those modes in the room are, you know, they're going down the depth of the room. Okay, our length modes. So those are the ones we're splitting. We do not want to measure in front at our knees. We don't care what our knees or the dog hears. We're not going to measure behind us. We're going to stay in line with our row. And if we did episode 7 properly and we got our subs aligned properly or set up really well, you know, and then got them aligned. Now you can use auto setup for that. It can do decent if your sub placement is good, and we've got past episodes that cover that. So you should have a similar response at your main seats. You know, the person next to you on either side, you know, hopefully you got a similar response. So that means you can measure at these 3 seats and expect to have a good outcome, because you don't have wildly, different responses down in the modal region. Now, real quick, we've got two different types of sound in the room. We've got the modal frequencies, and that's what we're talking about here, which is why we don't want to measure in front of us and behind us. Because, like when you walk around a room and you hear bass at one step, another step over, there's no bass. That's what we're avoiding. We don't want to measure those wild different frequencies, okay? So do not measure in front of you and behind you. I don't know why they recommend that. Don't do it. So that's going to be the #1 game changer for using Audyssey, is where you set that mic. Now again, it doesn't mean you have to do it this way. It's just the way I do it. Now here we're talking about the modal frequencies, the bass. Now there's another portion to it. It's above the Schroeder frequency. And the Schroeder frequency is where, but below the Schroeder is where you have modal frequencies, stepping through the room, hearing bass here, no bass there. And then above that, we're gonna have where the room no longer dominates, but reflections dominate. So, they're smaller frequencies, usually around 300 or 400 hertz is where this transition is gonna happen in your typical size room. So we're gonna handle that differently, and that's gonna be a really game changer, or another biggie that we're gonna cover in just a few minutes. All right, so now we're gonna hit next. Okay, now, place the microphone, blah, blah, blah. Okay, we're not gonna do this setting. You've all seen this, or the setup. It's gonna tell you to put the mic, after that, it's gonna tell you to measure here 2 or, then 3, whatever, like no more than 2 feet away. And then it's gonna have you measured in front, behind. Again, I'm not doing the front and behind for the reasons we've already discussed. Okay, so that's gonna give us good measurement. So if you did your subs well before this, or you have them placed well, you can expect to have a good response post Audyssey, or post any setup. I don't care if you have Dirac or whatever. If you're adding crazy responses in front of your seating area and behind our seating area, and even too wide if we know that we've got modal issues out there, expect a poor response for the end result. We've just run our Audyssey. We're gonna go to our manual setup here. Now we're gonna jump into the editor app. So don't think we're leaving that out, because there are some huge changes we can make in there that are really gonna be, let me put it to you like this: before the editor app, I wouldn't even use Audyssey. That's how big it is. A couple of the changes in there, the things we're now allowed to do that before we weren't allowed to do unless you had like Audyssey Pro. All right. Okay, amp assign. We'll go ahead and just look at all this stuff real quick. Now in this system, I've only got a 2.1 because this is all temporary. Like I said, we're staying in a camper until we build the house, which is starting next week. That's when the videos are gonna start coming out on the build update, the progress videos. So it's like day 331 in the camper. I should look like Tom Hanks in Castaway, with my hair down here, except for the top, but we wanna make sure our speakers are laid out properly. So when you come here, episode 1 and 3 are gonna get your speakers laid out perfectly, but here is where we actually tell the receiver what speaker is what. So if we've got speakers behind us, say we have a 5-channel bed layer, 5 on the floor, and a couple some up top, say 5.1.4. If we label those speakers surrounds, but they're actually behind us, they're not located properly. So now we're gonna have gaps when we're panning around, then speaker or sounds that should be off to the right are gonna be behind us to the right, and that's not gonna sound good. It's just not gonna sound good. It's gonna be a poorly performing system. So we wanna make sure speakers are located properly and labeled properly. Because you remember, especially Atmos is object-based, so we need to make sure that the processor knows where all of our speakers are and that they're properly located so objects are properly placed. Okay, speaker configuration. Now, if you've seen episode 9, you know that we're gonna use small. We're not gonna use LFE plus main, or we're not gonna use the large, because we know what happens to our bass response when we allow other speakers to sometimes produce those frequencies with the sub, and sometimes they're not producing them. It's just throwing wrenches into the subwoofer response, or the bass response. Sometimes it's gonna be okay, sometimes it's gonna be trash, depending on what speakers are allowed to play. So we're gonna control what speakers are playing from 80 hertz and below. And if you need to go a little bit higher than 80 hertz, you can do that. As long as your subs are up front, you're not really gonna be able to tell where the bass is coming from. So if you have to fix an issue, we've gone over this in the main to sub integration video. there's an issue at 90 Hertz, maybe you want to bump that crossover up a little bit. If it fixes an issue, the subs weren't localized, it's a win-win, because not only you fix your issue, but you've got your subs producing more of the modal frequencies, so you're going to have a better response in the room. Again, if you're lost with what I just said, go watch episode 9. It's going to fix you up. All right, center, we don't have a center. Okay, this is all self-explanatory. Like I said, I just have a 2.1 system for now, just so I can do this video. Normally I don't even use this little building right here. Okay, distances. Now, your auto setup is going to do this for you. Now, all of your speakers, those are going to be basically actual distance. You can get a tape measure out and you can measure from your main to your, your seating area, and you can kind of verify those. And sometimes it's in milliseconds, and generally it's every millisecond is a foot. It's not exact, but that's just kind of a generalization. But luckily here with Audyssey, or this Denon, it's going to give it to us in feet. And what it's doing is it's delaying the sound so that everything hits our ears at the same time. So if we have a speaker that's closer, it's going to be delayed, more than another speaker that's further away. That way they're going to hit your, ears when they should. All right, now the subwoofer. Subwoofer saying 7.4. In this room, the sub is actually the same distance away as, this front, actually the front left right there. It is not actual distance. It's whatever it takes to get the subs and the mains aligned. It's an alignment setting. It's not an actual distance setting. Do not set subwoofer to actual distance. I've seen the videos, even from people with well over 70,000 subscribers, and that, heck, I thought they knew what they were talking about. Tell people to set this to actual distance, and I was just like a palm to the face. Like, are you kidding me? You just pushed everybody off a bridge. We don't want to do that, okay? It's an alignment. It is not a distance setting. And there's a video on that too, main to sub integration, how to verify it. But anyway, if you needed to change it, if you had a dip at the crossover point, you would come in here and adjust that up and down. Of course, you need some type of measurement tool. And again, there's videos. Just go look, check out the channel for those videos. All right, and levels. Now, of course, when I hit this right here, you're going to hear the pink noise, and you can adjust your levels. Now, it's good to go ahead and verify. Audyssey is going to set this up for you, and it's going to set it up to reference, or it should. And most of your AVRs and processors should, but not always. So you may want to go, verify at your seat. And I've got a video on that too. But anyway, it's okay to maybe boost the surrounds, maybe, the Atmos a little bit. I wouldn't go crazy with it. Now, with the way our ears are made, of course, it's not like a microphone where you stick the mic up pointing towards the ceiling, it can hear everything, equally. The back of our ears kind of block their rears. So, I'm not going to be bash anybody for maybe boosting those rears a little bit. I mean, I've done it. Now, if you have to boost your center, you've got problems in your room. You've got acoustic problems. I have never, ever had to boost my center and always had crystal clear vocals and everything else. Now, I say never. Before I started treating my room years ago, before, I really jumped into the science side of it. I mean, I've been building subwoofers for 20 years, but, so I've kind of progressed over the years. Before that, I had problems just like everybody else. Treat the room. You should not have to do that, because when you boost that center, yeah, you may make it easier to hear the center because it's louder than everything else, but you're also boosting the issues, the acoustic issues that are causing you to have trouble hearing that center. It's going to fatigue your brain. So there's a huge difference, not just in audibility, but in just general enjoyment of the room when you treat the reflections. There's a video on that too. Okay, let's move on. Crossovers. All right, now, if Audyssey tells you or suggests a crossover of 120, it means the speaker's not reaching below, that low. So it's suggesting 120 Hertz crossover. So I would not go any lower than Audyssey suggests. Now, if Audyssey suggests 40 for the mains, see on mine, I don't know what it suggested, but I think on these little Paradigm bookshelves it was 60. Now, again, go watch episode 9 and you'll understand why we're setting it for 80. Okay, we want the subs to produce as much as possible because they guarantee us a known response at the seat, a known accurate response. So that's why we're going to go with 80, because it's a modal frequency. It is not based on how accurate the speaker is. Modal frequencies are based on, of course you need a good speaker, but they're based more on the room itself. So it's not about how good your speaker is or how big its drivers are. It's about quality and knowing what's hitting our ears and controlling basically the response that hits our ears. So we're going to set that for 80 unless the processor tells us that our speakers can't go that low. Maybe we'll go a little bit higher. Okay, we don't want to force our speakers to go lower than they can. Subwoofer mode, it's going to default for LFE. That just means the subwoofer is going to play LFE, plus anything set to small is going to be sent to it as well via bass management. So you can change this. This is where we were talking about LFE plus main, like we were talking about a little while ago, and that's a big we don't want to do that. You can go look at episode 9 and it's going to explain why you don't want to do that. And not only that, it's going to show you what happens to a good known subwoofer response where we've done our work and aligned it, and we go and throw a main into the mix, basically throwing a wrench into our response, and you're going to be able to see the response and how it negatively affects it. And if this sounds better, then that just means you've got subwoofer problems with your subs by themselves. They've got some issues. It should never sound better. All right. And low pass filter should never be less than 120 hertz. Now this is one of those things that really shouldn't exist. I don't know if manufacturers want to make sure that they've got the setting, because Joe Blow over here also has this setting. But the LFE is a low frequency effect, and it's the 0.1 in our 7.1 or 5.1, you know, or with Atmos 7.1.4. It's a mono signal. Even if you had 15 subs, it's still considered a 0.1. So it ranges from like 20, actually it goes lower than 20, I think we all know that, but up to 120 hertz. So we don't want to have this lower because you're going to block some of your LFE. And maybe there's not much up there at 120 hertz. I mean, some people kind of argue that, but the thing is there's no reason to block it. And this is also, don't forget, from episode 9, jack your crossover point up on your subs plate amp. Turn it up all the way. We don't need it. The processor receiver is going to do all the filtering for us, so we don't want to block anything at the sub, and we don't want to block our LFE here. So this really shouldn't even exist. You can have it higher than 120, just don't have it less than 120. All right, let's take a look at the audio real quick. Now right here you can adjust your subwoofer level. This is to taste. Don't let anyone say that, you know, well, you shouldn't jack your, you know, your subs up. You can tweak them. Some people like it a little hot, some people don't. You know, you want a nice response that is doesn't have to be flat. You know, I like a house curve because it sounds more natural, but adjust to taste. All right, then we have volume. Okay, this is our scale for our volume knob. I like the one that goes down to the negatives. That makes 0 reference, and like if we're -15, that means we're 15 dB below reference. So it's just easier to compare because that's really what most people use. You know, if you're at -20, it means you're 20 dB below reference. Closer you get to 0, the louder it gets. Now, of course, you know, there's another scale that goes 0 to 98. And like I said, it's just, you don't run into many people using that. Most people like 0 to be reference. All right, then you can set a limit. And this is like how loud you can turn it up. In my last room, my home theater, when I was getting ready to sell it, I didn't want people, you know, I left the room running. They could come in and demo it when they were looking at the house. I didn't want people jacking it to crazy levels because I know somebody would. So I had it locked out at -10 dB, so the volume just can't go any louder. -10 dB is freaking loud. All right, then we've got power on level right here. Now this just means whatever the volume was whenever you turned it off, that's what it's going to come back at. But you can set it at mute, or, you know, you can adjust it to wherever you want. If you want to come on at -30, or -20, you know, you can do that. And then mute level, of course, you know, you can make it mute all the way down, or you can make it mute a certain dB level from where you're at. All right, then Audyssey. We're using XT32, but you've got reference and you're going to have flat. Reference is going to be a natural kind of fall. Okay, it's actually going to show us on our editor app, which we're going to look at in a minute. Okay, but it's actually kind of a natural sound, and the reason I say that is because as sound travels, if you ever heard a car crash, or like, you know, you imagine a train crash off in the distance, you get a, you know, a kick in the chest from all the bass of it, the boom, but you don't hear the glass breaking and stuff like that. And the reason is, or even a car crash, you know, you may hear the upper levels, but not like you would if you were right there. And the reason is because they're smaller frequencies, so they travel they go through many more cycles to get to any specific distance. Where the larger waves, maybe 50 feet long for one wave, versus some of the upper frequencies are inch or so. So I mean, they're working a little butt off to get to you. They lost a lot of energy. So as sound travels, it's naturally going to kind of teeter off towards the top end. So the reference kind of mimics that, so it's actually, some people say, oh, you got to have it flat at the seats. Well, flat is kind of artificial. It boosts the highs. So it's not what your speakers or your system would sound like, untouched. But it's fine. If you like that, use flat. So reference is going to have that taper. Now, once we go into the editor app on our phone or your tablet and we start doing tweaks in there, that's going to be saved under reference in your receiver. So when you go to that, you're going to have all the changes you made in here, or you can go back to flat. All right, dynamic EQ on and off. Now that is a loudness compensation. Now if you remember some of the sub discussion, episode 9 and some of the other ones, we talked about loudness compensation, and that is a house curve. The lower we get from reference, the less natural a flat response in the bass sounds. It starts to sound weak. As we get at a lower level, we need to boost the bass up. And dynamic EQ, I love this feature. I mean, I really love dynamic EQ because as you decrease from reference, it's making changes to the volume of the bass and trying to just keep a natural volume of bass, and so it sounds good no matter what level you're at. So it's not going to keep it flat. If you're at reference, it will disable, and then you can, if your system is well set up and aligned, it'll be flat, hopefully with no big dips and peaks, but that's setup issues. Anyway, and as you go quieter, it's just going to start boosting that bass and keep it nice and natural sounding. So I love dynamic EQ because a house curve makes or breaks the experience. It just does. All right, reference level offset. If you look, all right, dynamic volume. Now this is compression, okay? This is taking, some people call it night mode. This is taking, the upper end of the frequency response or the sounds and the lower end, and it's just cutting them off. It's neutering them. All you have is what's left in the middle. So you're not gonna have like any really great highs, and you're not gonna have any really great bass. It's just gonna be kind of blah. But this is good, if you're doing night listening or something like that. All right, then we've got LFC, low frequency content, and that's basically, again, kind of like a compression. It's just neutering the bottom end. The sounds that, might propagate into other rooms of the house, the really low ones, it's kind of cutting those off too. So I would leave that off. I would actually set it up, my listening preferences, just like this. Reference, because I like to use either reference or I want to use what I've set up on the editor app. And dynamic EQ on, that's a must for me. 15 dB for the offset. Dynamic volume off, low frequency content off. So that's pretty much it in the head unit itself. Now, at one time, Audyssey kind of sucked. And the reason I say it sucked is because you had things like Dirac that allowed you to tweak the response and to do some things that you couldn't do in Audyssey unless you had the Pro Kit, which means a professional had to come in with the Pro Kit and make the changes in your receiver that you couldn't do yourself. The things that really made things like Dirac so much better. Well, they smartened up and they made it available to the public. I mean, it's a $20 app, but for what you pay for this hobby, to have, for $20, don't let $20 hold you back from being able to really unleash your system and get what it's capable of. And there's a couple little changes in here that are very huge. So that's what we're going to cover right now. All right, so now we're going to move on to the Audyssey Editor app. Now you're going to see me looking down at my phone. The camera's not going to be, I'm not going to be looking at the camera, that's why. And I'm going to be recording everything that's on my phone. Okay, so we're recording. All right, so I'm going to open up the Editor Multi-EQ app. All right, so here we are in the app, speaker detection results. This is going to tell us fronts, surrounds, and that room I actually had them, and you can see what Audyssey thought they should be set at 60 Hertz for the the mains. Room correction results. Now this is going to be a before and after. This is not a measured after. So this is wishful thinking and heavily smoothed. It's not going to look like that. Okay, if you actually got REW and measured it. Now if you smoothed it enough, it would. Now there's a little dip in there. You know, at 15, it's 2K, a little dip at 2K. Now, if you ever wondered what that is, that's Audyssey thinking. Speakers have a crossover point around 2K, or at least most two-way speakers. They suck at 2K, so we're gonna put a little dip there, you know, and I guess they're thinking that a lot of speakers do have issues around the crossover point, so by putting that dip there, overall, a lot of people are gonna be happy. If your speakers don't suck, this is not something you would want to happen, to purposely, you know, take an accurate speaker and put a purposely put a dip in it, okay? So anyway, that's not something I would ever use. But before, we could not get rid of that. We were stuck with it if we used Audyssey. Okay. Target sound options. We've got 2 different roll-offs we can use. Okay, you know, that's kind of self-explanatory. It's just different the way it's tapering off the high end. Okay, mid-range compensation. Now that's what we were talking about, the little dip. Front and surrounds, you know, you can turn them off or on. Of course, I would turn them off. Okay, curve editor. Now here's where you can go in, you can adjust it. Say you don't want to use dynamic EQ, which, you know, is like a loudness compensation that changes depending on the volume. You want to do it yourself, so you can just go over there and you can put your finger on it and kind of pull it up. You know, you can kind of tweak the sound how you want it. I mean, it's, now this is not loud or room correction. Not correcting any issues we picked up in the room. We're just altering, you know, kind of like the sound of the speaker, basically, without doing anything really negative, or like we're not measuring the speaker and trying to fix an issue that exists here but may not exist over there. This is like an overall just kind of tailoring the sound to your taste. Definitely nothing wrong with that if you want to mess around with it. Okay, frequency range. This is huge. Right here, you're cutting off what Audyssey can do. Now this is the biggest part that I was excited about. This is all I cared about. When the Editor app came out, I didn't care about anything else. This is what I wanted. Now if you remember on episode 7, I had a 7009, you know, Marantz. It didn't have this capability, so I didn't use Audyssey because I did not want it trashing my speakers above the modal frequency. Now again, the modal frequency is where the room is dominating our response. We can have a very accurate subwoofer, but you're still, when you step through that room, you've got bass here, you don't have bass there. So above that modal frequency though, you know, if we've got good speakers, you know, and we spend our hard-earned money on these speakers and we know they're accurate and they've got a great off axis and a great on axis and we've treated the room properly, we don't want to go in there and take a microphone measurement and say, you know, the mic is like, oh, we've got a reflection, or we see a null right here, so we're going to boost, or there's a peak right here at this frequency, like, you know, 1500 hertz, so we're going to cut that down. But now over here to the left, that peak doesn't exist. Okay, that peak's not there, it's just in this seat. So now we've cut to make the response, you know, flat for this person. Now this person's got a hole, and the reason is because, you know, it's measuring these different spots and trying to fix these issues in the room, but the issues don't exist all over the room. A good way to put it is your voice. Okay, you have a certain tone to your voice. If you were to measure your voice and look with REW or measurement software and go whoop, you know, and get a sweep of your voice is accurate to you, okay? But let's say, you know, we take a microphone and we measure your voice and we say, oh, no, we don't like the way his voice is. You know, it's got some peaks and nulls. We don't like it. We're going to EQ it. Now your voice is no longer your voice. It's not accurate. And that's what you're doing to these accurate speakers when you take these room readings and you let room correction go in there and EQ it and do all this stuff to it. I mean, you saw the before and after. I mean, it's heavily EQing that response. And I had a good speaker, but when it's done, I don't have an accurate speaker anymore because it's changing the source. So the best thing to do, in my opinion, is to let it only handle the modal frequency. Above that, you know, you paid for that good speaker. Let that speaker be itself. You know, it's an accurate speaker, just let it go. And there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be kind of like, I don't know about that. But I mean, if you think about it, you know, it's a good speaker. Why are we changing its frequency response when we paid for that frequency response? Okay, now you have to treat the room properly for it to really, you know, for anything to sound good. I mean, I don't care if you got $200,000 speakers. I can blow them away with a cheap pair of budget bookshelves. if you treat the room, if I treat the room and you didn't. Piece of cake, easy to do. But so you've got to take care of the room. All right, so that's the biggie. You know, if you've got a smaller room, maybe 300 hertz, I wouldn't really go over 400 hertz with this frequency range limiter, you know, and that is basically same from 400 hertz and down. I'm gonna allow Audyssey to do some EQ. Above it, don't touch my speakers. I've got good speakers, don't touch them. Now, if you've got bad speakers, we've gone over that too, there's episodes on that. There's some speakers out there that, you know, I've had. If you have a really good speaker with on axis and off axis, it can be cheap. Doesn't have to be expensive. Everyone's gonna like it. I mean, that's already been proven. Floyd Tool's got a video. It's a really great video where he takes a little JBL 305, you know, $100 speaker and puts it, or on sale it's $100, puts it against, you know, speakers costing $10,000. Sighted test, it got spanked. Blind test, when people couldn't see what speaker was playing, it beat a lot of them, held its own with all of them. I mean, it did great because it's a good speaker. Everybody's gonna like a good speaker. You're not gonna have anybody bashing it. Doesn't mean they're gonna like it better than everything else. But when you have a manufacturer or a speaker brand and you've got a lot of people saying, I don't like this speaker's harsh, or you know, you need to do your homework and be careful. So room correction can be useful with poor speakers because then the source itself is bad. So then heck, you might as well just try some full bandwidth EQ. Just let Audyssey do its thing all the way up. So limiting it is not always the best case. It depends on the gear. If it's set up right, if the room is treated right, you know, I would definitely recommend you limit the EQ. And this setting right here, this page is the same stuff you can do on in the receiver. So, and once you do this, you can then load it onto the receiver. So this little button in the top left up there, you'd press that and share with your audio video receiver, and it's gonna load all those changes you made into the receiver. Now again, I'm not on the same Wi-Fi, so I can't do it for this tutorial, but I mean, it's super simple. So anyway, guys, that's my recommendation on how to get your system up and running. So that's pretty much it, guys. The house build starts next week, so I'm gonna get my little GoPro. So I'm going to get my GoPro and fasten that sucker to my bald shiny head, I guess, you know, kind of do a little style instead of walking around with it like that. That way I can just walk around, point, and we're gonna get that kicked off. And anyone who hasn't subscribed, go ahead and subscribe, hit that notification button so you know when the new videos are gonna come out, including the new home theater, all those build videos, you know, weekly or bi-weekly, I'll be putting the videos out. That way you can kind of keep up and see, you know, that room come alive. And you know, here it is right here. I've already nailed down some supporters. We've got Valencia home theater seating. We got the Tuscany brown that's gonna be going in there. It's a picture right here, really beautiful seating. I think it's gonna really look really good in this room. We got that, we've got Seymour audio video. I'm gonna be using the masking system. If any of you have taken me up on the Home Theater Guru's layout service, Seymour screens, you know, that's pretty much the only recommendation I make because budget-wise, you really can't beat them. From DIY to their magnetic masking screen, which is what I'm gonna be putting in this room. I mean, they have great material, been using them for 15 years. So that's another sponsor. And we've got ToneWinner. They're gonna be sponsoring the amplification for the theater. So I'm really excited to try those out. I've sent customers to them because, I mean, for the price, tons of power for the price, and my customers have been very excited. I mean, every person I've talked to that's tried them has been very impressed with those amps. Really beefy and just a really good amp. That's gonna be it for this one. This was my big video I wanted to get out before I started the house. Anyway, I'll see y'all for the next one, guys. Take it easy.